It's a big week coming up, and we thought we'd kind of roll out the red carpet and bring on a very special guest here to get us ready for Tennessee and Florida.
Yeah, Andy Staples of On3, who is he's the Cadillac. He's the Cadillac of the On3 shows and video awards. If you've not been watching his shows, you should do that. If you love college football, it's about not just the SEC; it's about all things college football. But Andy's got a unique perspective to the Tennessee-Florida game. Lived in Gainesville much of his life, has covered it from both angles, has covered it nationally as well. Andy, good to see you. Thanks for being on the show. I'm going to ask you this one right out of the gate. When your first day or two at On3, I did an interview with you, and you told me you were driving the Joe Milton fan club.
Yes, sir.
2 weeks. Where are you in the passenger seat, the back seat, or are you still driving heading into week 3?
I'm a little concerned that my fenders have fallen off and my tailpipe's dragging. When he was one of 11 to start the game, I was very, very concerned. JD Piquel, who also does shows here at On3, we did a segment on my show called Nightmare Scenarios, and it was basically before the week of the first games. We said, what can happen, win or lose, that will send a particular message board into meltdown mode. And what we said for Volquest was Joe Milton airmails 3 would-be touchdown passes, and they start chanting Nico, Nico, Nico. And it didn't feel like that happened in the Virginia game, but it definitely felt like the Austin Peay game was not Joe's finest moment. So I could imagine it was a little nerve-wracking there in the first half.
Yeah, it was certainly not a ton of fun, and Tennessee fans have lots of questions. Florida fans have lots of questions. As I mentioned, you've known this rivalry for a long time. Do you remember one like this? I think you can say this for about a lot of teams in the league right now, Andy. But do you remember this rivalry game with both fan bases going, I'm not exactly sure 2 weeks in what we have in front of us?
I think some of the Butch McElwain games were like that. The one that ended, and it's funny because all the years just run together now, but the one that ended with the bomb from Will Greer to Tyree Cleveland. Like, I remember both fan bases were just kind of out of sorts, didn't know what the heck was going on. No, this is 2015. This was the Will Greer one. So
okay, 2015.
Yeah, and I just remember thinking this is one of the worst played games of football I've ever seen in my life. And then that last play happens, and the Florida fans are wah! But it didn't. I remember writing a column after that game going, you think Jim McElwain's a genius and you think Butch Jones is a dunce, but if things had happened just, one play different, it's flipped. So are they really that far apart? And sure enough, they both wind up getting fired pretty much the same time. So it really was, I think that period was the one where people were just not like. Now, I will say the 2016 Florida-Tennessee game where Tennessee won in Knoxville, that was the high point of I guess the next week when they beat Georgia was probably the high point of the Butch Jones era. But other than that, I think the middle of that decade was both programs just going, what are we even doing here?
Well, and Tennessee's got a better feeling, obviously, with the year they had last year. They have expectations. Florida's still trying to figure things out. Tennessee fans are a little more. I mean, listen, a week ago, Tennessee fans had this thing locked down. I mean, they were going to roll into the swamp and take over the swamp. Now they've got questions. Now they've got concerns. What do you make of Florida 2 weeks in? It looked like they cleaned up a lot of administrative stuff, Andy, and got a little more organized looking. Now McNeese is not very good. We know that. But what do you make of Florida 2 weeks in?
I don't know what to make of them, Brent. I know the fan base is pretty apathetic. They're not expecting much. Like, if Florida can win 6 or 7 games this year, they're going to be pretty happy with that, especially if the younger players are better. The Utah game did not inspire a lot of confidence because of what you said, the stuff they had to clean up. That actually could have been a one-score game in the fourth quarter, but for a lot of the administrative coaching mistakes that were made. And that in year 2 is where the Florida people are like, okay, wait a second. You've been telling us that Billy Napier has this incredible attention to detail. and they're having 2 number 3s on the field on the punt return team. Like what's going on here? Are we being sold a bill of goods? And that's the part that they've got to show that they have fixed. And if they do that against Tennessee, they can be competitive in the game and have a chance to win if Tennessee's not playing well. But talent-wise, Tennessee's better right now. Tennessee's got a lot better weapons than Florida has offensively. They should be able to come into Gainesville and win this game. And, it's one of those deals where I think if Florida did somehow steal a win, the Tennessee fan base that's a meltdown moment right there. That's all you got to win this because, with Tennessee, Heupel overachieves the first year. Then last year, you see what it could be. And it's like, okay, now you got to take that next step. Any sort of step back is unacceptable. And in this case specifically, it's not acceptable because Florida's not a team that should beat them right now. This roster is not where it should be to be able to beat them. Like, here's what happened. I'm thinking if Tennessee goes in and does what they probably should be able to do in this game, and they beat Florida handily, if you're Billy Napier, you may go, I'm going to play the young guys and just show that my recruits are better than the ones I inherited and hope they get better as the season goes on, and there's hope at the end of this season. But if he can steal a win in this thing, it just takes so much pressure off of him. Josh Heupel, if he loses this, people will be mad, but he's already had 2 really good seasons given, based against the expectations. And he could still have a very good year this year. This would be a massive win for Florida. For Tennessee, I think it might just be a speed bump if they don't win it.
Andy, what do you think Florida's game plan is going to be? Obviously, I know you're not sitting in those meeting rooms and everything, but with attacking Joe Milton, or you think they're going to kind of try to beg Joe Milton to say, all right, you got to throw it over the top to win this football game? We're not going to let you run and win this football game. We're going to make Joe Milton win this football game, because the last 2 weeks, they're just letting Tennessee just run the football, and that's what Tennessee's done and found success with.
Well, based on what we've seen from Austin Armstrong so far, they like to heat people up. And he's their first-year defensive coordinator, young guy. He does seem to like to bring a lot of pressure, which against Joe Milton might be the way to do it. Try to force him to make mistakes, because Florida, their best shot is short fields and quick momentum shifts. Like that's what would allow them to win the game. If Tennessee can run the ball and control the clock, that's a bad deal for Florida, because they're not very explosive on offense. They're the ones that ideally will be control. If they have played the game they want to play, they're controlling the ball on the ground. They're controlling the clock. And then you put pressure on the opponent to go score, and maybe they make another mistake. But the thing that you've seen with Florida also is, like, the first play out of the gate against Utah was a massive coverage bust. You cannot do that against Tennessee.
No.
They're going to burn you every single time. Tennessee's offense is built to create those kinds of busts. Like, you have to be on guard against them. And so if you don't have that sewn up, and I think for the most part, Florida played better after that. Now, what people forget is there was a trick play in the Utah game where the receiver who was throwing the ball, or maybe it was the running back throwing the ball, he just airmailed it a little bit, but it was perfectly set up. The receiver was wide open. It was a touchdown. So Florida was not perfect on defense even after that, but that was overshadowed by all the other mistakes that they were making. So that's the key for them is do you avoid that and Tennessee scoring on these quick strikes? Because Florida's got to work hard to score these days, guys. Tennessee can score like lightning, and that just demoralizes a team that has to work that hard to score.
So much talk is on Tennessee's offense and the tempo and airing it out and all that type of stuff. But Tennessee's defense, through 2 games, and again, not the greatest competition here, but Tennessee's defense appears to be making an effort to play more guys. Healthy rotation in the front 7, a cornerback at star, maybe not a safety, but Aaron Beasley has come in and really kind of taken this team by storm. What have you seen from Tennessee's defense, and where all the concentration is always on Josh Heupel's offense? Feels like this defense can be something that makes Tennessee a pretty solid football team this year.
It's hard to tell much from the Austin Peay game, but I thought in the Virginia game they looked really fast off the edges. Yeah. And against a team like Florida, which has, against Utah was not blocking very well and was not giving Graham Mertz a lot of time, that's a scary thought for Graham Mertz, because he's actually a pretty decent athlete, but he's not Anthony Richardson back there. Like, he's not going to take off and run for a 70-yard touchdown if you flush him out of the pocket. They've got to protect him better than they have. And we'll see. The question, I think, and this is a big question, kind of an existential question for Florida all season, is do they have the personnel to actually do that against good SEC defenses? Like, can they protect against a team like Kentucky? Can they protect against a team like Tennessee? We don't know yet. They're playing Utah, which has a very good defensive line, but also had some injuries, right, and was rotating some younger guys in and some newer guys. So that's the part that I think if you're Florida, you're very worried about, is how does that line hold up against Tennessee, especially if Tennessee can get pressure with 4. Because if they're getting pressure with 4, that means you can really mix the picture up for Graham Mertz, and you can create those mistakes I was talking about Florida trying to create.
All right, Andy, the rest of the country right now is licking their chops at the SEC because they get tired of the whole SEC mantra out there with the struggles that this league has had with Power 5 teams outside the conference. Just kind of quick hitter here, quick thought. What do you make of the league in general 2 weeks in? And maybe what do you make of college football? I mean, are we really seeing the talent pool because of the portal even out to a degree? What do you make of the start of college football, specifically the SEC?
It really does feel like it's evened out more. And I went to the Florida State LSU game in Orlando, and I had seen Florida State practice about a week and a half earlier. My thought coming out of the practice was, okay, they have some really special players. Like, you knew Keon Coleman, the receiver they got from Michigan State, was going to be awesome. Jared Verse, who's going to be a first-round draft pick as an edge rusher. He was great. But the question was, like, how's their offensive line hold up against a very good LSU defensive front? Because their offensive linemen, some of them may wind up in NFL camps, but they're not going to be high draft picks. So how are they going to hang? Well, they hung very well. And, some of those guys, they have a transfer from Charlotte. They have a transfer from UTSA. And they've done a good job of plugging spots. I think Florida State's probably the best example of a team that use the transfer portal to get significantly better. Because my thought was, you can use it to plug some holes, but if you'd like to be a true national championship contender, that only comes from recruiting through high school. That's recruiting and developing the way Georgia does it, the way Alabama's done it, the way Ohio State does it. And now I'm not so sure. Now I'm wondering, could a Florida State hang with some of these teams? Because the way they kicked the crap out of LSU in the second half of that game was pretty shocking to me. And then you see Duke, which bolstered itself through the transfer portal, looking as athletic as Clemson. And there's something to be said for, no, this person wasn't a 5-star recruit out of high school, but they're a grown-ass 22-year-old who can play and has proven themselves at either the Group of 5 or Power 5 level. And you're like, okay, well, maybe you can make your team significantly better that way. So there's not as much of an excuse for when you take over a roster. You don't need as many years as people are going to say, which that brings you back to the Billy Napier point. Because, I look at Hugh Freeze, what he's got to do at Auburn right now. My guess is his roster flip happens a lot faster than Billy Napier's did. And they're competitive sooner.
Is the league in general, is it down, Andy? Is it too early to tell? Is it just a league that's void of great quarterback play right now? What do you think of the league?
It's definitely missing the great quarterback play. I don't think the blocking's that great in the league right now. Alabama, again, has some issues. And I think Texas's defensive line is going to prove out to be pretty good. And like when you see the NFL draft next year, some of those dudes are going to be taking, second, third round type players, which Texas has not had before. But Alabama struggling a little bit. South Carolina looking horrendous trying to block North Carolina. Florida not being able to block Utah. I think the offensive line play might be a little bit down, not just the quarterback play. And like Spencer Rattler, you go back to the North Carolina game, Spencer Rattler actually played really well. I talked to Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl, and so Spencer, I think, was sacked 8 or 9 times, and Jim said he could have been sacked 20 times. He just played well enough to avoid the other 11. And so I do think line play and like LSU against Florida State. They didn't hold Will Campbell, who we all think is going to be a first-round draft pick. Like Jared Verse just ran the arc on Will Campbell. There was a play where he didn't put a move on him. He just outran him around the corner and crushed Jaden Daniels. Like, I never would have thought that was going to happen. And Jared Verse is a potential first-round draft pick, but when he's going up against the tackle that we think is one of the best in the SEC, you just don't expect to see that.
Well, Andy, I know you're a busy guy. You got a show here on a Sunday night as well, but you go live at different portions throughout the week. First season with On3, it's been a great success so far. What do you got coming up on your show, and what are some things you're working on this week, entering week number 3 of the college football season?
Well, Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time, which I know overlaps with you guys. So watch Volquest first, and then we're on demand right after that. So you can just go to my go to my Twitter feed, Andy_Staples. I'll have the link up there. You can click on the YouTube link or subscribe to the podcast version and just have it in your phone when you wake up tomorrow morning. That's the other easy way to do it. But we're leading with Mel Tucker, who's been administratively suspended and I think is probably coached his last game at Michigan State. That bomb dropped about midnight Eastern time on Sunday morning, and just kind of what that means. And are we in an era when schools will do whatever they can to get out of that kind of contract? You know, is this the greatest bag fumble of all time? I don't know. I mean, this could wind up costing him $80 million. And then we're talking to Tim Watts from Bama Online about what went wrong for Bama against Texas, because we could we could talk about Texas, but I think Texas feels pretty good right now. Alabama has a lot of questions to answer. Mm-hmm. And so we talked to Tim about that. And then as the week goes on, there's a lot I want to get into. Like we got to talk about Iowa. You know, the drive for 325. I think that contract with their offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz, where he has to average 25 points a game or he loses his job, is brilliant marketing, because now I have to watch every Iowa game. And in case you didn't know, he's 6 points off the pace right now. They've only scored 44 points this season. So he's already behind the 8 ball. But that one, I mean, the Coach Prime thing, like the Colorado thing, is fascinating to me, because we always talked about Coach Prime and the roster flip and everything he was saying. But now that we've seen Deion Sanders' team play a couple games, I think they're on the verge of something really big. Maybe not this season, but I think he's going to build something really big, either at Colorado or somewhere else where after they steal him.
Well, the best thing he did that nobody gave him any credit for, because it was all about Louis and I'm coming and all that, was who he brought with him on his staff. Mm-hmm. That's a good football staff that he has put together at Colorado that nobody has talked about, because it's all about the persona of him. But you go peel the curtain back and look at what he has working around them. That's a good football staff, Andy. That he's put together.
Sean Lewis, their offensive coordinator, is a great example of that. He was the head coach at Kent State. Kent State had this old AD whose philosophy was, I'm going to make as much money as possible from these body bag games. And I don't care if I get, if my team gets the crap kicked out of it before we go into MAC play. So like Sean Lewis's team never really got a chance to be its best. Like last year, they had to play at Washington, at Georgia, and at Oklahoma in the non-conference. But Sean Lewis running that old Baylor offense was a wizard at that. And you're like, okay, you put that in charge of the offense, give him a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders and some weapons on the outside, he's going to figure out what to do with it. And he sure has.
Well, Andy, we appreciate you joining us. Thanks so much. And we'll have to get you back on the Rocky Top Rewind or a Volquest podcast here pretty soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, guys.